This is K12 Tech Talk. K12 Tech Talk. The podcast by K12 Techs for K12 Techs. Real conversations, real arguments, and real banter on trending K12 technology topics and issues.
Live from the NTP studios, this is the K12 Tech Talk podcast. This is episode 158. I am Josh. With me, as always, most nights, is Mark.
That doesn't go together. It's
I
either
know,
always or
it's
most
contradictory,
nights.
and you're gonna it's gonna be that kind of night tonight, Mark. I can tell you're gonna argue with me the whole night.
I'm feeling feisty.
I can tell. And with us is Chris. No one has seen Chris since the security symposium last Friday. So we're not real sure where he is or what he is doing. There's rumors of another conference that he might be at right now. There's rumors that his high school girls basketball team made it to the final championship game for state basketball, and he might be there dressed up as one of those guys in one of the green leotards. We're not real sure where Chris is. So if you see Chris, take a picture of him and let us know he's safe. NTP, the studio sponsor, I ran into David Friday. Got to shake his hand. His pickleball handshake is ridiculous. That's how he intimidates all of the competitors on the pickleball court. One thing, he had literally just flown in from Vegas, landed at like midnight Friday morning, and then he was at a meeting that I got to see him at Friday afternoon in Columbia, Missouri. So yeah, the guy is constantly on the road. So if you are in the market for not only pickleball advice, but a sock as a service or SentinelOne licensing, give NTP a call. Email David, DWREN, at ntp-inc.com. I promise they can save you money on your SentinelOne renewal if you are an existing SentinelOne customer, and they will probably be cheaper than, Group Slaps and the other big competitors on the market. You see what I did there? I didn't name the company. I did synonym, I guess. I'm willing to bet they'll be cheaper than them, and it's top tier, and it's 24/7 monitored SOC. Did I tell the story last week that I triggered the SOC and I got a phone call?
No, what'd you do?
So there is a tool from a company called Black Hills Information Security. If you don't know the folks at Black Hills, go over to their website. They offer a number of tools for free, and one of the tools that they offer is called Cred Defense. And what this tool does, this is a shameless plug for Black Hills. They are not paying us for this. Cred Defense, you run it against your Active Directory, and you feed it a rainbow table of known passwords. And we just downloaded the Rocku text file from the web, massive password dump text file. And you say, audit my user passwords and give me a report. So you hit go and it's supposed to run. Well, I hit go and apparently something in SentinelOne didn't like it and the app closed. I'm like, oh, damn it. I'm going to get an email from the SOC. Sure enough, within about 5 minutes, I'm getting an email from the SOC saying, hey, we just killed this application from running on this machine name. It was this application. Was this an intended use or was this malicious? I'm like, no, it was me. Sorry. So I had them add it to the allow list so I could run it. But on that discussion, the SOC really is paying attention. Well, I guess the SOC is really paying attention. And two, if you haven't run Cred Defense, Mark, your guys might like this. It will run. It ran for maybe 90 seconds and got the hashes of every one of my user accounts in AD. And then if it was able to hash it based on, or decrypt it, dehash it, whatever, based on the Rocku file, it told me this user has this password based on the hashes that it was able to dehash. It will also tell you users that have the same passwords. So yeah, it's super cool and it's free. to download from Black Hills Information Security. So go check those guys out. They probably have never heard of us. And like I said, they're not paying us to say any of this. But all of that to say, the SOC is watching.
Do you think we probably should have run that by the lawyers? Like, you just told everybody to download a hashed giant spreadsheet of usernames and passwords.
It's the Rocku file. It's not usernames. It's just passwords.
Oh, okay. Don't worry, Mark. It's not the username. It's just everybody's passwords.
And it's not everybody's password.
Sorry.
Google, geez, Mark.
I'm not Googling this. Whatever this is, I'm not Googling it.
Oh my God.
No.
I'll Google it.
No.
You should. It's the Rocku text file. I'm sure someone out there knows what Rocku is. Oh, look, on GitHub, it's listed.
Yeah, you know who does?
No information about this target.
The FBI knows exactly what you're talking about. And Josh, you just triggered us to be on the watch list.
Probably. Yeah, so it is a commonly used it is commonly used by hackers to crack a file or a password.
Okay.
Reddit, is Rocku still relevant? Yes. Yes. What's Wikipedia say? Oh no, that just says it's a company. Right. Yes, Rocku, I don't remember. It's a massive file. But it's got it's 133 meg of just text files. I am not answering this. My son is trying to call. So yeah, all of that to say that the SOC is watching. Okay, so all of that to say, my beer is on ice tonight and the SOC is watching. It's been one of those days, Mark, where you don't have any cold beer and you just gotta put ice in your cup and pour your beer over ice, right?
Oh, I don't know about that, but okay. Should we hit the news?
Yeah, let's hit the news.
Speaking of news, Chris is actually not attending the podcast tonight in protest because of the ban on TikTok by the U.S. government today.
Yes.
So he is actually out in protest because he's so upset about that.
I think he might have, he said he was going to a conference. I think he might be actually flying to DC to take part in the Million Man TikTok dance on the Capitol steps tomorrow.
It's only 30 seconds long, but it's going to be a good dance.
But they got to do it like 16 times in a row to get it right. The weirdest protest I've ever
totally
heard
weird.
of. Yeah.
Well, make sure to heart that one. In other news, Papercut. We're going to release, or we're going to link to this bulletin in the podcast show notes, but they have a security bulletin for March 2024 where they are patching a number of known exploited vulnerabilities. So if you are using Papercut, which we know many school districts do, please make sure that you are patching your crap and keeping your stuff up to date.
Yep.
Josh, you had another patch as well you wanted to?
Yeah, Fortinet released, they released the bulletin a couple nights ago. I think it was 3 or 4 CVEs. I think, thankfully, check your own homework on this, but I think the newest revisions of all of the firmware strands or firmware channels, the newest revisions are already fixing those CVEs that they released yesterday. So if you have if you're running that newest rev, you should be fine. But go double check just to be sure. That's another great reason. When these alerts come out and they release a firmware patch or a new revision of code, to go ahead and install it. I know I don't like being on the cutting edge of code, but sometimes you just got to do it. So yes, patch your crap. That's our new theme.
The digital SAT is live. So the SAT was launched on last Saturday to about 200,000 students who took the first online assessment. The online test is obviously very similar to the original paper version with a couple of new enhancements. The first one and the most prominent one being it's shorter. So if you're used to a 3-hour SAT test, which I remember it being at least that when I was taking the test, it's now going to be on average 2 hours for the students. So that's a good cut. Students can bring their own device. I was never expecting to see that, but they can bring their own device or use a school issue device, or testing centers have devices for loan. and it's being issued on the Blue Book app. I'm not too familiar with that one, but we're going to link to that the technology that's being used to power that. I have to say, in going through the College Board's technical page of what to do to get ready for it, I'm very impressed. They did a good job with documentation. So that link will be in the show notes, bluebook.collegeboard.org, in case you are going to be administering the SAT test and need to be ready for it.
So some interesting discussion points here. First, a question for you. Do you East Coasterners give the SAT with as much like, does it hold as much clout still as the ACT or more than the ACT? Because I've always heard it's an East Coast, West Coast thing, not necessarily a Midwest thing.
So I don't know. I mean, I'm just trying. I don't have as much involvement with the SAT in my role, and I don't have kids, so I guess that's the bigger problem. So
Sure.
I don't really know from that perspective. I think back to like when I was in high school, I only just remember hearing about the SAT. So maybe so. But yeah, I never thought about it that way. I
Because
just thought that
I
was
can't say, my kid's graduating this year, and I can't say there's ever really been a hard push to take the SAT. And I know from an administrative
wow.
standpoint, we don't administer the SAT at our building. We do administer the ACT about every month. And then I think in Missouri, all juniors have to take the ACT in the spring. So we're hardcore ACT, and that's given by a couple different applications. But it's interesting, the SAT, they're using Blue Book, and that's, I guess, administered through the College Board, because all of our AP courses that our kids take in our high school, if they take the AP test, it's also through the Blue Book app. So we've had to push Blue Book to our Chromebooks for probably 2 years. It's been since COVID, I know.
Okay.
I want to say 2 years.
Okay. Interesting.
But ACT is administered through TestNav, is the kiosk app that is used for that.
Yep.
So
we
yeah,
use TestNav for a different tool, but I remember seeing that was the ACT app.
Interesting. Yeah, I had always heard that SATs, that was the preferred test for colleges on the East and West Coast, and ACT was pretty much everywhere else.
Okay.
What else you got?
A couple more things. ILO Group, which is a consulting firm, has released, and I'm gonna use their phrase.
Okay.
The ILO Group has released the first in the nation artificial intelligence framework for district leaders.
Huh.
Sound kind of familiar?
Yeah. Did they steal it from us?
No. So a few months ago, COSN and the Council Grade City Schools got together and released the first, what I thought was the first artificial intelligence playbook and framework for school districts. And then the ILO group released it yesterday. And I hate to say it, are we stumbling on a copyright infringement here? Or
maybe we are. There might be a cease and desist letter coming.
So I went through, and the framework of this one is almost identical to COSN and the Council Grade City Schools framework. And starting with your political decisions that need to be made, who to reach out to for your legal advisor, are they looped in? Your operational needs, the technical needs in terms of how is your data stored, and the fiscal implementations. And I went through this document today, and I thought I was just reading an AI generated version of the COSN and Council Grade City Schools version.
Okay.
So,
2 questions.
Yeah.
And be honest.
Yeah.
You know some rather important people. Do you know this Dr. Julia Rafael Bayer of the ILO group?
No, I had never heard. I saw the press release about this. I saw the news, and this was being touted as the first in the nation. And I was like, well, wait a minute. Is this just a rehash of COSN's? And then I realized this is a different one. So I don't know this group.
Now, my second question.
Yep.
Did you email the secret society or COSN? Because I know you have contacts that are rather big names in both of those organizations. Did you rat out the ILO?
I did not, although we might be the ones breaking the story on this one here. So we
Oh.
might have to
Tweet it
tune
then?
these folks in here and just say,
Yeah.
I think your work has been stolen. That being said, I think both reports are very, very good. They're both, there's a whole lot of overlap across the both. The COSN one was released back in October. It was put together by a bunch of school districts. And it is what I would say is a very practical tool to go through. There's a really good checklist that you're going to be going through and saying, have I done this? Have I done this? Have I done this? Whereas this one that was released yesterday is a little bit more of a narrative type documentation and gives maybe a little bit more narrative for each of these things. So when it comes to curriculum and instruction, what some examples of AI looks like for a curriculum instruction and special ed and those kinds of things. So while I think they are very, very similar, I do think they both have value. The COSN Council Great City Schools version, which we talked about on the podcast, I would like to think is the first in the nation, and then the ILO Group one, which just came out this week, rather good. But I wouldn't say it's the first in the nation. I might have to ask them to adjust that.
Theirs is dated the 6th of March, and COSN's was, geez, that was back like January, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think I look back at my earliest notes on this was back in October, but I may have been more of a public press release in January. But yes, months ago.
Interesting.
So
yeah, we'll have to tweet at everyone involved and see if and like you said, there's value in both, and I think the more word that can be spread, the better off it is. But it is kind of strange how
yeah,
markedly similar
remarkably.
both documents are.
Yeah. And then the last one, which I don't know if this belongs in the news section because I thought it was news, and then I found I was apparently alone on this one. We woke up on a Monday morning, on this last Monday morning, to absolute chaos with school networks being down when it turned out to be that Google was having an outage. We opened up Down Detector really quick. We hadn't heard anything from Google. We opened up Down Detector and it had spiked really, really high on Monday morning. So clearly we were in the middle of an outage. But then apparently this was not, the Google never acknowledged it.
Yeah.
I did see a post on K12 sysadmin about it with somebody else saying, is anybody else experiencing an outage? But what was for me in my district a like morning breaking event was never acknowledged by Google, and there are no news articles or anything about it. So Josh, did you have an issue on Monday? Is this fake news? What
I don't recall having an issue Monday morning. But remember, we're an hour behind you,
Yep.
so I don't know how long it lasted. Number one, um, I really don't remember seeing an outage Monday.
It was for us, it was like we're a very heavy Google district, and so it was a lot of schools saying that the internet is down. That's how heavily they relied on
Huh.
Google. But
Maybe
then
it was an East Coast data center thing.
yeah, it had to have been, but it was just very interesting that Google did not let us know anything. So that is the news. The last one, I guess, is not part of the news because it was only a me problem. And a few of us on Reddit, and that's it.
Interesting. All right. Since that's the last bit of the news, come up out of the news cellar, and while I talk about Visor real quick, Visor has been with us quite a while. They've got some things they want to highlight that can help you manage all of your student devices. Chromebooks certainly, but they also can help you manage iPads, Windows devices, and things like that. Visor, it's starting to be summer season, so get those visors out. They integrate with Google Admin Console, Jamf Pro, Jamf School, Intune, or whatever Microsoft's calling that now, and more. Ultimately, Visor allows districts to manage all of their student devices from one place, wherever that is and wherever they are. To find out how you can simplify your student device management, go to vizor.cloud/K12 Tech Talk. That's Visor with a Z, vizor.cloud/K12 Tech Talk. K12 Tech Talk listeners get special pricing and a free K12 Tech Talk hoodie. So head over to Visor, vizor.cloud/K12 Tech Talk. Chris wrote that really weird. And reach out to him, and you'll get special pricing and maybe a free hoodie. So tell him we sent you. So what do we got next? Go back to Trello and
listener email.
Listener emails. Yeah. So listener Steve sent us an email, and it revolves around parental access to filters. Your let's just, to keep it simple, Chromebook filters. Do you, if Steve's student filter has recently released a feature update that allows parental access to see, here comes Chris, that allows parents to see filter statistics of students off campus and on campus. So his first question revolves around, is that a good idea to enable and allow parents to do that? His second part of that is, under what circumstances do you allow parents to view their students' search histories? So as we welcome Chris in here, I think he is in DC getting ready for the Million Man TikTok.
Hey, yo.
So
what are you guys doing?
We're recording without you again.
Well, I'm driving.
We heard that you were on your way to DC to protest the TikTok ban.
I considered that flights were pretty cheap, but I'm actually driving to the lake to go to an Infinite Campus conference.
Josh, I think you missed that up. Chris was going to DC for a different protest, so it was not the TikTok one.
Oh.
Also, he's not allowed back in DC.
Get out of here.
So all right, Josh, you just asked a question. Do you allow parents access to the filter? And you said it was around statistics. What exactly can a parent see in the web filter?
So if it's like ours, we have a filter that has a parent portal, and this is our second filter that has had this. The parent can get in and see time spent on apps, websites, frequent websites, stuff like that, blocked activity. They can't necessarily change any policy settings specifically while they're at school. Depending on the filter, they might allow a parent to create more restrictive filters at home, less restrictive filters at home if you allow that. One, I know the filter that we have now, they have a feature where the parent can pause internet access, period. So it's like, hey, it's dinner time, put your devices down, pause, which is a cool feature. So thoughts? I know, Chris, you and I talked about that a little bit today. Mark, you and I talked about that a little bit today separately as well. What are you guys' thoughts on that while I drink my ice beer slushy?
Chris, I'll let you go first since you're driving.
I prefer that the parent has to do a request to the school district, that any of those requests of usage that, that's coming with teacher involvement or principal involvement, I guess for even the initial discernment sake of getting through some of the maybe not understanding why the kid was searching for whatever they were searching for, or why the school is allowing that website to be used, that kind of stuff. I think if you don't allow open access to the parent without it being initiated and kind of going through a procedure, I think it kind of helps maybe nip some of the communication that could go off the rails pretty quick if you're just looking at something and don't know what you're looking at.
I think there's a valid point there.
Yeah. I don't know. I haven't really thought about it. We don't have that capability within our system. And I would be really afraid to let that out, simply because at least when I look at reports from our filter, it's very, very complicated. Because
they dumb it down is the wrong word, but they make it much more easy to understand. And it's more of a top hit count and time spent count than anything.
Oh, okay. All right. I'm okay with that. I think that could be, I think if it's a summary of like what your student has looked at, and that's pretty good. If it's a page by page, click by click, I'd be really nervous about unintended consequences that could cause.
From a classroom teacher's perspective, Mark, since we all know you were a teacher, would
Wah,
that
wah.
if you were a teacher in a school that had parental access to filter logs or even the summary of reporting, would that give you pause, or would that make you think twice about some of the content you delivered as a third grade teacher or whatever you were?
You know, what's interesting is I never thought about it that way. I didn't think about it as parents moderating my content as an instructor. The two things that came to mind were, hey, this could help if students knew that their parents could see more of what they're spending their time on their district device. That might help kind of calm or avoid certain behaviors or certain bad behaviors. You know, if you know that, hey, my mom is going to get a summary of my activity at the end of the day, or even more of a detailed report, like I'm going to think twice about searching something. On the contrary, though, I don't think all teachers will view it that way. I think some teachers might be concerned that a parent is going to, what's funny is I didn't think about it as moderating activity, but more of like nitpicking or judging or saying like, how come my child spent this much time on YouTube in your class? That kind of stuff.
Or even worse, CNN.
Oh yeah. We don't want to go there.
Yeah.
So I worry about, I think you're going to have mixed responses from teachers, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
That'd be a really interesting thing. I think, like I said, some will like it and some will not.
And I honestly, I hadn't thought about it from the kid thinking twice perspective. Like, oh crap, mom.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Mom can see me searching.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The kid doesn't respect the teacher, maybe, but absolutely respects their mother. They might take a second guess at going to that website, that gaming website, whatever, that unblocked game in the middle of class.
Yeah.
Because mom's a watching.
Yeah. I was also thinking about, like, is this another reason for one kid to jump on his friend's Chromebook and start searching some really inappropriate things to get him in trouble with his mom?
Sure. Yeah.
I would think that way. I'm sorry.
Could very well be.
I think, like, I am for parent knowing what their child is doing. I really think it's more boiling down to me the burden or the workload that it might add to the tech department that I'm not sure my current tech department needs to take that on. You know what I mean? I'd rather just filter through the occasional report requests that we get. If that would cause an uptick.
Yeah. I will say historically, our old filter had it, and we had it turned on for that. We might have had 10 parents out of, several thousand parents use it. And I can't say it ever generated a single call for us, but I'm not, I'm bigger than Chris, but I'm not anywhere near Mark's size. So, it's not a fair statement to say that it wouldn't create any extra phone calls for Mark. But, I don't know, take it with a grain of salt, I guess. So listeners, if you're out there and you have a filter that has the parent portal or the parent summary feature allowed, do you allow your parents in? I'd be curious to hear from you, and we can report back what those emails say.
This is reminding me too. I've told I have 3 kids that go to my school district, and 2 of the 3 are in high school. And I've told them several times over the years, you better not ever be on a report that I have to pull.
Yeah.
Like, do not make me question my ethics on if I help you bury the body or not. Do not search for that stuff on my network.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
You know the phrases. Yes. Stay away from them. Yeah. No, and that's a good point. Because those alerts take place, and sometimes they're of employees' kids, and an administrator having that conversation with a kid and or a teacher becomes rather uncomfortable, because we're all coworkers. Yeah, it's there's a lot of shared embarrassment going around there.
Hey boys, I can tell my cell phone service is literally dropping.
Okay.
So I'm going to go ahead and head out of here.
All right.
I'm heading down to this Infinite Campus conference to sit through SQL classes and running customized reports and exports.
Well, say hi to
I'm
Charlie. Don't you have a
really
meeting?
look-
Eh,
Yeah, he's meeting with all departments tomorrow at some point.
Well, have fun. Yell at him for us.
All right.
All right.
See you
ya.
guys.
Bye. So yeah, he's on his way to DC to take part in the Million Man TikTok dance. So look for that on Twitter coming soon. So let's talk about ClassLink real quick. ClassLink, as Chris likes to say, like clever but better, which is going to be a really weird, awkward conversation because we have an interview with Clever coming up soon that Mark won't be a part of. It'll just be Chris and I. But hopefully they don't hear this and bring this up. Really, the conversation with Clever is more going to revolve around their MFA for students and what that really does, what it doesn't do, and then we're gonna try and bring up the stupid teacher library stuff. So look for that coming up. So yeah, ClassLink, like Clever but better. If you want to know more about ClassLink and what they can offer for you, email Jill. Jill's got a email address here, but it's gonna be longer for me to read it to you than it will just to say we're going to put her email address in the show notes because it is a rather long email address. So if you want to find out more about ClassLink and how they can help you with rostering and other things, email Jill, and her email address is in the show notes. All right. Mark, what is our next topic?
Main topic for tonight. So we're approaching testing season.
Yeehaw.
Testing season around the country typically is shortly after the January, February timeframe. So most school districts start to ramp up their tests in March, April, and May. What are you doing to prepare? And more specifically, we actually have a question from K12 Tech Pro that I'm going to drop in the middle of this conversation. But Josh, what are you doing right now? What are you doing to get ready for online testing? What's your school district doing? What are your staff, either in tech or in the schools, doing?
So this actually came up in conversation with my superintendent today. I have a bi-weekly meeting with her, and we just it's kind of a pulse of the IT stuff going on in the district. And today, a large part of the conversation revolved around spring assessment. And if you're not in Missouri, Missouri changed things up this year. So we have two types of assessments. We have K through 8 assessments that take place in the DRC testing application. That's been that way since I've been at my district for 10 years now. And then at the high school level, the EOC, or end of course assessments, were always done through Questar. Well, I guess the contract with Questar came up for renewal and they didn't win, so now everything is shifting to DRC. So positives and negatives to that. Now, positive is everything's in one application, but we also now have to plan for about 600 more kids in our instance, because not every kid takes an EOC. We have to plan for more devices to hit those caching servers. So we got to make sure those specs are good. We got to make sure that application is pushed out to all those Chromebooks, because before it wasn't. We have to make sure that the demo application is installed on teacher machines so they can walk through the tools and make sure kids are comfortable with it ahead of time, taking practice tests, that whole thing. So it's been a little bit of a ramp up, a little bit earlier than what it normally would have been. I know behind the scenes, our sys person is sending all sorts of pre-code files to get those accounts set up for testing. So I found out today our testing window actually starts on like April 15th and will go into the middle of May, which is a little bit shorter than what we normally do. And we test right up to the last damn minute of school, man. Which I don't like, because we always hear horror stories, especially in the spring for whatever reason. Like a squirrel got in and chewed fiber, and a school didn't have internet for 2 days, or it's in the heart of testing season and it screwed everything up. So I don't like waiting until the last week of school to do testing. But that just seems how we tend to operate most years. What are you guys prepping with, Mark?
I mean, we have our normal kind of local assessments that we do year round. I'm guessing when you say EOCs, end of course assessments. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, end of course, that like
Yep.
your algebra 1,
Yeah.
biology.
Yep.
And then AP testing is in there as well.
Yeah. So we because we I have obviously local control over those assessments. We're in pretty good routine and how to do that. All the apps and stuff are pushed out. That stuff goes on all year round. In my state, we have a state specific assessment. It is delivered on TestNav, which we had mentioned earlier in the show. So at least it's a more of a national kind of familiar platform, but it is a state specific assessment. There is definitely a lot of prep. There is some technical work behind the scenes to prep the caching servers. We are still using caching. Well, let me actually should take that step back. I wonder if we may have actually gotten rid of our caching servers, but at least they're still in place. And I know that they have been caching the content as part of our regular practice.
Us too.
Obviously making sure that, any sort of critical network upgrades that we need to get done are done before testing season. We tend to do a lot of our network work at schools within the spring season. So scheduling all that work around testing is always hard. I can't tell you how many times so our schools can determine when their testing window is going to be. And I can't tell you how many times we've had to cancel a network upgrade because the school's like, oh, I forgot we scheduled our assessments during that time period. And then really it's just to be honest with you, calming nerves is probably my biggest work that I have to do. We have a lot of turnover with staff, and so that means that every year there's a group of principals who this is their first time delivering the online assessment, and there's always a couple that are going to be very nervous. And so we'll also within our team kind of plan out what's our our day one support strategy, and that's probably the bulk of our work is supporting schools on that first day. Once you get through day one of a state assessment, everything else is easy peasy. But we always know if anything is going to go wrong, it's going to be on the first day. And then after that, we kind of breathe easily. So a little bit of a surge. I will say around this time is when schools might reach out to me with some odd, unique requests. And that's actually what sparked this main topic was a post on K12 Tech Pro. And K12 Tech Pro member had posted that last week, our high school, about 3,000 students, attempted to test 600 students in their cafeteria without telling anybody, and it didn't work. Actually, I'm going to cut this out. I don't want to give her name. That's the whole point of K12 Tech Pro.
Yeah.
So what has this ever happened to you where a high school has tested 600 students in one room, maybe with or without asking you? And Josh, do you have any advice for this poster of what they can do or should start to do in order to prepare for a room of 600 computers trying to test a high stakes assessment?
So this gets back into my days of when I was more a network nerd than anything. And, the wireless network was all I had to worry about, or the physical network was all I had to worry about. And I became pretty good friends with several engineers at Aruba Networks. We're talking 10, 12 years ago, 15 years ago. And, they said one of the big things in these heavy density type environments, you're either going to design for coverage or throughput. And, if you're designing just to say we've got coverage in here, you might say, well, in my high school gym, I can cover my gym with 4 access points and we'll have signal everywhere. And I'm only going to plan for maybe 100 devices to be on those spread across those 4 APs due to airtime, not accounting for different spectrums, not accounting for the number of antennas in each AP, just general rule of thumb. Now, if you're wanting to cover for throughput or density, the way it was explained to me 12, 15 years ago, the rule of thumb was you're going to need an AP for about every 30 clients that you expect. And in a gym, and this was at the time that Aruba was starting to get into stadiums like NFL stadiums and stuff, and they were showing me designs of, I think at the time it was the new 49ers stadium was a big Aruba wireless customer, where they had put conduit and boxes, AP boxes underneath the seats, and were putting APs about every 50 feet in their stadium. So, it comes, the conversation is going to come down to money of, okay, am I going to waste all this time designing this and planning for all these access points for you to turn around and say, sorry, we don't have the money to do that. If that's the case, put them in their rooms, let the teacher proctor it, because you likely have an access point in every room already. And quite honestly, that's the stance we've taken. I've taken the big giant open space of, you know, a couple proctors and a couple hundred kids in a room, while in the olden days of paper, it worked great. Now, when you've got electronic devices and everybody's fighting over the same airtime and throughput, and like I said, your wireless in your gym may not be designed for that. That is not a good scenario, and that's I've kind of held fast to that. We won't test in those big open spaces like that with large number of kids for that reason.
Yeah. I've been very lucky. We have a department, our kind of sister department is the data and assessment team, and they have been very, very strong in not recommending schools do that simply from an assessment perspective.
Yeah.
It's not a good test environment for kids. You want students to be more comfortable, more in a familiar location. And so they actually, strictly from a student assessment performance perspective, want to see schools avoid large testing groups. So I'm always like pointing to them first.
Sure. Let them say no.
Yeah, let them. Well, they don't say no. They really strongly advise against it. And we also do the same thing. From a technical perspective, we just say that there's a lot of things that can go wrong with that size of a group, and we would prefer to see the students spread out in classrooms. I don't always win that argument. And in the first year, one of the first years we went with our state assessment, our biggest high school, and honestly, our most kind of high profile high school, had said, we're going to test all the students in the cafeteria because we just don't have the scheduling time. We need to put as many students in one room to do it. So we did it. We even had our wireless vendor involved, and they were very influential in helping us to prepare and being on site for support. And man, it worked, but everybody lost a few weeks in the stress of that kind of thing. So it's not easy to talk a school out of that. But if you can, I think from a testing perspective and from a technical one, you're putting all of your eggs in one basket. And if one access point goes down, now you're looking at hundreds of kids impacted.
Well, I think you can draw a similarity, like when you go to a big conference, and we go to nerd conferences, so it's a little different. But when you go to a big conference with several hundred people and the conference center isn't designed for density, they're not designed for coverage.
Yeah.
You can tell very quickly, especially when it's a technical conference, because the Wi-Fi just chokes.
Right.
And that's the scenario that I think 90% of gyms, if not 99% of gyms, K12 gyms across the country would be in. Because again, I'm a penny pincher, so this is going to come off as a penny pincher statement, but why would you design Wi-Fi in a gym that gets used primarily for PE 95% of the time with $50,000 worth of wireless gear when you're going to test in that room for maybe 2 hours a year? If you do it that much, it's just not a good spend. I can spend that money on a generator. Like there are so many other things you could spend that money on.
I will say very similar to this though, and this is like the thing that gets me all stressed out, is when we have principal PD, we often have a room with probably 150 to 200 people in it. And that is equally as nerve-wracking, as awful as it is to have, a couple hundred students. It's worse to have 200 principals. And when there are technical glitches, and when the task of the PD is to download and watch all this, one movie or high bandwidth streaming activity, my heart starts skipping a beat, and it's very hard to see that kind of stuff. So
and that's where I err on the side of what I was told many years ago of if you have a room that is built for high density, like a large conference room, like you said, or a lecture hall at a university, because that's one of the areas that I helped design. You're going to put an AP in for one AP for every 30 to 50 devices. And at a high ed level, you can automatically assume every person has 2 to 3 devices between their phone, their laptop, maybe an iPad along with them, Maybe their watch is going to connect to like it's not one device for every person. It's multiple devices for every person.
Yeah, I mean, when I think back to that high school that we did, this was about 5 years ago at least. That was 500 or 600 kids in a cafeteria. And we had planned for 500 or 600 devices. Nowadays, you're planning for every kid to have
Two
a
or three.
device, a cell phone, and probably a watch. And if all three devices are on the network,
And
you're
they don't even have
500
to,
kids.
they don't even have to be on the network, Mark. They just have to have their wireless card on and querying the network to
Yeah.
take up a fraction of airtime, and that's all it takes.
Yep.
That's the same amount of airtime they would spend sending and receiving data.
So you're looking at 500 students is now 1,000 to 1,500
Right.
devices pinging and signaling, and that's the hard part that schools just don't understand when they plan these kinds of things. Is that is a very, very different animal than a classroom.
Absolutely. And again, I go back to the higher ed space. That makes that's a different discussion because those lecture halls are used every hour every day.
Yeah.
Where a cafeteria or a gym, again, might be used once or twice a year for mass testing. To me, it's just not a good spend of money.
Yeah, it's almost the comparison I make with consumer technologies when people want to buy something at Best Buy or Walmart and say I've got this thing online, I'd like to put it on the school network. And my point that I raised to them is like these kinds of things that are designed for home networks are designed for environments where you're going to have a dozen to 2 dozen devices. They're not meant for being put into an enterprise environment where there's hundreds of people and thousands of devices talking back and forth through the network, and all of that extra traffic or junk is going to impact when everybody needs to be on a single state assessment. So
and it's time, like you said, that's the high priority. And granted, state assessments don't take a lot of bandwidth because typically, unless they're ASL, unless they have an ASL accommodation, you typically don't have video with them. Some of the ones we have audio, but primarily they're text based. So they're not huge bandwidth hogs, but I mean, they could be if you had a couple kids with accommodations. They could very well be bandwidth hogs.
Well, so if you've got a colleague or a friend who's got to prepare for this and they're saying it's a done deal, the decision's been made to test 600 students in the cafeteria in 2 weeks or in 4 weeks, what's your advice?
Have a backup plan. I think there needs to be a backup plan of not only same day moving to multiple locations, potentially punting it to another day where you move to classrooms. The other option would be, okay, give me time to see if I can rush deliver some beef eater access points that can handle 75 clients per access point or 100 clients per access point. Those aren't going to be cheap. We're already out of E-rate season. Timing wise, you're going to pay a premium for them if you need them here before testing window, and let's just say a month, we're guessing. It's not ideal. I think all things considered, and if budget is a big player, which in what district is it not, I think the reasonable conversation is put them back in classrooms. But I don't know the extenuating circumstances of the real situation.
Well, negative Nancy.
Yeah, I play her on TV.
I was just going to suggest just jump on a call with your MSP, your network provider, basically an outside opinion who has knowledge of your equipment. What you mentioned earlier, you talked to Aruba, we talked to our wireless provider, and they gave us some advice. Obviously, they're going to tell you what you already know, but if you have no choice and you have to do this, then maybe there's some tips where they can kind of double check your equipment while you're there.
The other thought would be, okay, let's do sort of a dry run. Let's say half the kids in and all have them load YouTube videos at the same time and see how bad that chokes.
Mm-hmm.
And that might give us an idea of how bad of an experience state assessment would be with twice as many kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, there's a little bit to said about proving a point. And clearly you don't want to wait until state assessment to prove that point. But I think if you could do a dry run of something, YouTube video or, everybody try and sign in to their Infinite Campus account, something like that.
Okay.
I think that could go a good distance as well.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about Absolute, one of our other sponsors. Chris sat through. Chris wrote this. He sat through. It sounds like torture. Like he needs a better way to put this. Chris enjoyed a demo from Absolute this week. That recording is going to be posted on K12 Tech Pro soon, and he is interviewing Oliver, Warren, and Pat over at Absolute, and they're going to talk unpacking. He even writes the word unpacking. They're all going to unpack all that Absolute can do for a school district, auditing the OS and what apps are installed, geolocating, freezing devices, and more. Email K12Tech@absolute.com to find out how you can use your hardware refresh budget to secure new devices and manage and secure existing inventory. So give Absolute an email and tell them that we sent you. Any closing thoughts tonight, Mark?
I have no thoughts. TikTok is blocked,
TikTok
or it's
is
about
gonna
to
be
be blocked.
Yeah.
I don't know. Chris is probably arrested down in DC again.
Yeah. I don't pour beer over ice. It's not great. But you do what you got to do sometimes. Let's see. We have an email address, K12TechTalk@gmail.com. We're on Twitter. I refuse to call it X. We do have the YouTube channel. Find us over there. Subscribe to us over there. We're posting the videos of our recordings over there. And if you are watching us on YouTube, subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcasting app if you haven't done that already. Yes, it's a little bit of double content, but you know what? Subscribers count. So let's talk about Fortinet. So we already mentioned, Fortinet's a good sponsor. Mark has Chris's email address here in a second. But they did release those CVEs the other night that you need to update. Be on the most current revision of firmware. They do more than just firewalls. They do switching. They do tokens. They do VPN reporting services. I talked to somebody, a friend of mine, that got the FortiAnalyzer and is in absolute love with the FortiAnalyzer. So if you want to know more, what is the email address, Mark? I don't have it in front of me.
I don't know.
We'll put it in the show notes. It's going to be Chris Illingsworth's email address. It's like FortinetPodcast@Fortinet.com or something like that. We'll put it in the show notes. Mark doesn't know. He doesn't prepare. All right. Let's see. I guess that was it. Man, we are quick when Chris isn't here. Have you noticed that?
Yeah.
We're spitting content, man. That was episode 158. Maybe Chris will be back next week. Who knows? Share us with your friends. Share us with your enemies. Patch your crap. We'll see you next week.
The views and opinions expressed on the K12 Tech Talk podcast are the personal opinions of Josh, Chris, and Mark, and do not represent the views or opinions of our sponsors or other organizations that we're affiliated with. The material and information presented here is for general information and entertainment purposes only. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.